So stick with me. It's a little complex. The film is Ari Aster's Midsommar.
I invited Danny to come to Sweden.
You know what she's been going through.
Christian says you've got this special week planned.
It's sort of a crazy festival. Special ceremonies and dressing up.
That sounds fun.
So Midsommar is the story of 4 anthropology majors and 1 long-begotten girlfriend who journey together to Sweden for a summer festival with a very, very small group of people in a town very far removed from society, kind of an ancient group of people who wear all white and flower crowns, and every summer they get together and celebrate the harvest and sacrifice a deer or whatever. These kids go out there to have a good time and see what it's all about. Things start to get weird, then they start to go wrong, similar to something like The Wicker Man. Midsommar is a story about a increasingly violent and oddly bizarre competition at the hands of what we soon find out to be is a cult. The movie is 2 hours and 27 minutes. It is a follow-up, spiritual successor, I should say, to last year's Hereditary. If you saw that film, we loved it on this show. Andy, what did you think of Midsommar?
So this is going to be really interesting. I didn't really know what to think initially. It took me a long time to process. It was one of those films, but the longer I get away from it, the more I think about it. I absolutely loved it, and I think it is one of the best films of 2019. It is, well, it's not scary. It is profoundly disturbing, but it's a lot of things. It's not so much a horror movie as it's a movie about breakups. It's a black comedy. It's a bit of a fairy tale. It's a bit of a drug trip. I mean, there's so many things going on, and that we see visually, and lots of underlying themes that it's a lot to unpack, and I loved it.
Yeah, I really liked it a lot as well. I'm going to be honest. I went in with the wrong expectations. I think I saw Hereditary, and I couldn't wait to see more from this very new director who had just put out this first film that was really good. This is his second one, Midsommar is. And I think I expected things I shouldn't have. I wanted to see more drama and more kind of long, thought-out plots. And ultimately, Midsommar is a movie with a simple plot, but is told in a very complex way that makes it really interesting and special. I wanted something more complex, and that disappointed me, but that doesn't make this not a good movie, and I want to talk about what worked and why ultimately I think I've come around and I'm really into this movie. So, where do we start with Midsommar? I suppose we start with the plot, right? Let's get started at the beginning.
Yep. Okay, so we meet Danny, who's in this kind of end of a relationship with Jack Rayner's character named Christian, and it's a very codependent relationship. She's always kind of calling him, blowing up his phone. You can tell he is tired of it. His friends say, look, this chick needs a therapist. She needs, you need to go ahead and break up with her, get it over with, like move on. And then she suffers a tragedy at the beginning of the film, and he feels like he cannot, that's not the right time to break up with her. And then she finds out about this trip that they're going to take to Sweden to study this festival, and inadvertently kind of hitches along, say, "Oh, that sounds fun. I think I'd like to go to that." Her friends, or his friends, kind of reluctantly say, "Okay, yeah, you can come." Right. And that kind of sets us up. So we have this really kind of awkward relationship that's very toxic, and we know that from the beginning. And we have this theme of family that rises out of the first act, and that's something that's going to be important through the rest of the film.
Yeah, I think something that's a stayover from Hereditary, Ari Aster seems to be very good at writing broken relationships. This whole movie, these two characters, this boyfriend and girlfriend, who are our main characters, you watch them bounce off each other, and sometimes it's just so awkward and strained, and like you can just see from a mile away these two shouldn't be together. In fact, the guy's 3 other friends, the other anthropology majors that go out there to the festival with them, they're talking about it the whole time. Like, you guys, this doesn't work. You should break up. This is not, you're awkward, and you bring out the worst in each other, and they totally do. But these two people don't have any good reason to break up. They don't have anything else to go to. All they kind of have is each other. So they just kind of tolerate each other in the worst way. And like, it's uncomfortable, and it just like makes me want to give somebody a hug watching it, because it just feels awful. And that's something that is a staple in a movie like this. Like, it's part of the experience, that feeling of dread and hopelessness that really does tie into the whole movie. That's a part of the horror, and it gets built upon later. And I think the three friends, they're fun, you know, they're kind of goofy. They're these anthropology majors who are hanging out and getting stoned and talking about writing their thesis statements or whatever about this Swedish festival. That's really what gets them out there, right? That gets them on the road to go out to Sweden and go do their thing. Now, what about when we get there, Andy?
Right.
Yes.
Jeez. So when we get there, we see there's a lot of pageantry. There's, first of all, it's very bright white. It's the land of the midnight sun, kind of. It's light 22 hours a day. Everyone is dressed in white. Everyone is incredibly friendly. Everyone is light skin.
Very unique horror film that way. Always sunny, always white.
Right.
Sunny all the time, yeah.
They meet this kind of communal family, and they begin to learn about them. They learn that they, have lots of different traditions. They drink a lot of natural stuff, which has hallucinogenic properties, which becomes a whole thing in the film. They all you learn they all sleep in one like giant house where there's 30, 40 beds where they all kind of commune together. And they kind of prepare for a week of festivities.
Yeah, and this like group of people out here, I mean, they try to make it very clear they're essentially like ancient. They're writing runes on things, and like when you go into one of these rooms in one of these houses, right, or even just the architecture in general, like it's so like archaic and old and fascinating. Like the shapes of these buildings and the looks of things are just so odd. But the people walking around are all smiling and normal, and most of them speak English. So like it's this odd feeling of like, yeah, this is kind of feel normal, but it really sets off that fight or flight response. It gives you that creepy feeling that just hangs over the whole movie. Did you get anything like that?
Yeah, it's so much of everyone's like a little bit too nice to be trusted, and there's food and there's bedding. Everyone's like, singing, dancing, wearing white. Children are playing. And you know where it's going. You know from the trailer where the film is going to kind of end up. And it's all kind of disconcerting because of that. Which kind of leads me into the next area. How it looks, the cinematography in this film is really brilliant. We get. While the film is mostly in light and very bright, there is a lot of darkness, and that's part of what makes the light parts interesting, is that you have moments of where things are very dark, particularly in the beginning of the film. But also, as I said, they do a lot of kind of hallucinogenic drugs in the film, and they illustrate that for the viewer, where you'll have things on screen waving and kind of moving around, and there's a part where Florence Pugh looks down and there's grass growing through her hand, and it's just these really odd scenes that put you into their mentality. And this happens throughout the whole film, and it is really brilliant. And I watched a short kind of scene dissection with Ari Aster where he talked about they had to really be careful and kind of change how intense that effect was and wasn't, depending on what was happening on screen. But it's I've never really seen anything like it, and it's part of what really makes this brilliant.
Yeah, I feel the same way. This movie is shot gorgeously. It is a masterclass in how to shoot a film. There's so many creative shots. There's so many long takes. I mean, there is a scene early in the film where our main characters, Danny and Christian, get in an argument, and they argue on screen for like 3 minutes, and it doesn't cut. It's one like 3-minute take of these two actors bouncing off each other, and it works great. Like you're not taken out of the movie. At no point does one of them feel clumsy. Like they're so acutely directed, and their lines are written so well, and it's shot so well. Like it's really immersive, and it really pulls you into the world of the film, which only makes the horror and the dread and the despair that much worse. Now, it's worth mentioning, I don't think this movie has any jump scares, but my God, I was dreading the whole movie, because it's like you said, You know, like when you see the trailer, you know, group of 5 white kids goes out to the middle of nowhere and hangs out with a cult, and it's a horror movie. You know where it's going. We all know. We don't have to talk about it. Like you just know. Right now, you're already thinking, I know where that's going, and that's okay. But like for a 2.5 hour movie, it's an hour before they even get out there to the woods. Like, or I think, at least an hour till something real kind of creepy or weird happens. It is such a slow burn, and that doesn't make it bad because it's such a pretty film, but it makes it just feel like you're just tense in your seat the whole time, like just waiting for the bad to happen, and then it starts to, and then things start happening. Can we talk about that at all? I mean, can we?
Well, a little bit. What I will say is that, again, we know that a lot of people probably aren't going to survive this trip, and there's some things that you know what's going to happen. And you know exactly, and when it does, you're not prepared for it. Like, and that's the brilliance of the director Ari Aster, where even knowing what's happening, it's still horrific when it does. And there's also there's so much dread that happens off screen, and this is another brilliant technique. I think there's sounds, there's screams, there's yells, there's just a character will disappear, and then we kind of see them later, and we know that something will have happened in between. And so you have to really pay attention to what's happening off screen and what's happening in between scenes to kind of piece it all together. And it's a great example of not hand-holding the audience.
Yeah, and you're right. A lot of things do seem to happen off screen. You'll hear a noise, or somebody will say, "Oh, I'm going to do this," and disappear for a chunk of the movie. I never really found that distracting, because this movie really does just kind of like snowball you into a sense of security that our characters have. By the time you get to the end, you're like, you know something's wrong, but like you can't quite put your finger on it until it's too late, and like then you know. But then we're already on our way. Like I'm doing a really poor job of talking about this. The point is it builds up in a really captivating way that I don't see horror movies doing nowadays. Like, we just saw Child's Play last week. It was terrible. And I wish it had done half the things this movie does. It's just a different kind of horror film. And you got to know that going in to enjoy it. But I think it's still super enjoyable regardless. We should talk about performances, or we should talk about gore. Which one do you want to?
We'll start with, we'll start with performances.
Okay.
So Florence Pugh as Danny, she's the main character who is going through this, not breakup, kind of pre-breakup, and suffers a family tragedy at the beginning. She's brilliant. She has to carry a lot of the movie, and there are these brilliant long shots where the camera will just rest on her face. Well, she'll have to go through a whole conversation, and she'll have to go through a whole range of emotions in that conversation, and she just does it so brilliantly. She has to go through so much as an actor, and she has to really carry a lot of the movie herself, and she's brilliant.
Yeah, everybody is. You've got Will Poulter as one of the side characters. He's very charming, as what he described in an interview as the very essence of toxic masculinity. He is. He's kind of a dick. To be fair, these three buddy friends, dude bros that are going out there, are definitely under the impression that we're going to go to Sweden and we're going to meet a lot of cool girls. So that's kind of their whole MO on the side, at least a couple of them. You've got, I don't remember his name from The Good Place, our kind of token black character, who in a very nice turn in no way is ever addressed racially in the film. He just happens to be black, which is very charming, and I wish more movies did that. Nobody's like, hey, that's a black guy. Like, it never happens. He's just a normal dude. I just don't remember his name, so now I'm being the one.
William,
the horrible identifier. Yeah, thank you, Andy.
William Jackson Harper.
Jack Raynor's pretty good as Christian, our kind of lead. I was a little distracted by him, but ultimately did okay. And Florence Pugh as Danny was my favorite performance of all of it. She was tremendous. This is the best performance I've ever seen out of her. It's probably the best performance I'll see out of her for a while, because Ari Aster just seems really good at directing women in despair. So, yeah.
I was going to comment on Jack Raynor as her boyfriend Christian. Does a really good job of making you hate him, because he is a real jerk in this, and he gaslights her constantly throughout the film, and his friends, which is kind of a theme, because that starts to happen to them by the cult when they're there as well. So that's another one of the many themes in the film. So you wanted to talk about the gore.
Yeah, I did. This movie does not shy away from the gore. If you were thinking, gore, I don't like that word, this movie's not for you. It's practical.
It's heavy on the body horror.
Yes, it is heavy on the body horror. People die. It happens on screen. It's usually pretty horrifying. So that's kind of the name of the game, just so you know what you're getting into. It's not, like while we talk about, a lot of things happen off screen. A lot of things happen on screen, so watch out. And other things that are happening on screen. At Ari Aster lore, we're going to talk about that. Like, he builds up this community to be thousands of years old, and like it feels like it's thousands of years old. There's all these paintings on the wall and figurines and traditions and runes, and everybody speaks this language. Like, it really does feel a little bit like you just got dropped out in the middle of Sweden and found this group of people. Like, it does feel fairly genuine for being shot in Hungary and being just a bunch of extras they had. Like, it really comes around. What'd you think about that?
Yeah, he builds the world and the culture of this the small hamlet village commune really well, where there's, they have elaborate clothes, they have these really elaborate murals, like you mentioned, painted all inside all of their buildings. I mean, that must have taken hundreds of hours because someone had to paint those sets, and they look good and they look convincing, and they kind of do farming and make linens and do other things to be self-sustainable, and again have this feel and look of being this commune and cult, because you have people that are very old and people that are very young and everyone in between.
I think the last thing we should probably talk about this movie is just the themes, right? Because that's the thing. In Hereditary, a big core theme was despair and guilt and grief, and how you handle that with a family. Ari Aster said this movie is about a breakup. What do you think? What's going on here?
So it's definitely again about the kind of final deterioration of the relationship between Danny and Christian, but there's a lot of other things going on. It's definitely about family. It's about kind of appearances. There's this whole mirror theme that I haven't quite figured out. There's a certain duality that's going on. There's a thing about air and breathing and like life, which I have no idea what this means yet, but there's this whole like this air thing that all the villagers kind of do, and that is also, we see this in the beginning of the film and kind of just throughout, and I think it's a very important thing, and it means something, and I don't actually know what, and it's another, just I think it's a brilliant thing that it's not spoon-fed to you. It makes you really think, but ultimately it's about family and support and grief, which are themes that he's kind of dealt with in Hereditary as well.
I agree, and I think I'm still trying to unpack a bit of that in my head, because I don't really know, like, I don't know, there's just a lot there. There's a lot that's not explained. This is a movie, I described it the other day when I was talking about it. I said this movie is kind of like Hansel and Gretel, right? It just drops breadcrumbs and just leads you deeper into the forest, and you get closer to the witch's house whether you like it or not, and that's what this feels like, and you walk away from it at the end of the movie thinking, wait, what was that about? What did that have to do with anything? And I think it encourages discussion. It encourages you to think about it. It's a deeper film. As one would say, it might be bold cinema. I mean, Andy and I got home and we were, and I hit you up and was like, we got to talk about this movie, and you got to tell me what you thought about this. And it's hard not to. And I think that's part of the fun of the picture. If you have other people to go see it with, it'll really give you something to kind of chew on around the water cooler.
Yeah, like you said, there with the breadcrumbs, there is lots of foreshadowing. There is lots of hints of things to come. Mostly all horrific, but they're well hidden, and you have to really be paying attention. And this definitely requires 2 viewings, and I think probably more. I mean, I think this is a classic, and I think every time you watch it, you're gonna find something else in it.
I think it was so gory and horrifying, I probably won't ever watch it again. But it is really well made for what it is. Like, it's not just a grindhouse picture. Like, it's not just awful things happening all the time. Like, there really is a feeling of like hopelessness and despair in it that like is tangible, and I haven't felt that in a long time in a movie theater. So should we move on to recommendations?
We should.
Andy, would you recommend Midsommar?
Absolutely, with some content warnings, which I'll get to in a second. But absolutely, this is the definition of bold cinema. This is a new entry into the horror thriller genre. We see something that I haven't ever seen before. We have great performances, a really deep film, very complex, lots of themes, things on the surface, things below the surface. It was a great film and a journey, and you're going to have to see it multiple times to really understand it. That being said, it is incredibly violent and incredibly gory, and there are, particularly tragedy at the beginning. You might want to look that up if you're a little squeamish, but but overall, absolutely recommend.
This is like the most mixed bag review we've ever given out. It's great and horrifying and good, and I don't want to watch it again. No, I really like this movie. Like I said, I went in with the wrong attitude. I think it's not your normal horror movie. You got to go in real open-minded. Like don't just think you know what this movie's about. Even with this review in hand, it's different. There's a lot we didn't explain in this interview in this review that you'll find.